Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. And yeah, going forward, I would like to use a lot more music. Music that I don't typically showcase on the show. I mean, not that I'm showcasing it, but my bump music, In and Out, has always kind of been, I've kept it in the vein of being techie and geeky and kind of retro sounding and whatnot. But I'm a geek about a lot of different types of music, just music in general. So I'm going to start using much more diverse bumps in these podcasts, in the radio show, basically just whatever I'm feeling, because sometimes I come across a piece of music and I'm just like, man, I really want to play that as a bump. So I'm gonna, when I am able to, barring any sort of legal ramifications and whatnot, I am going to feature a lot of different music on here because I'm a geek about music, and a lot of us are geeks about music, and sometimes I really just want to play Voodoo Child or a cover of Voodoo Child, as you heard bumping into this podcast here. By the way, I'm going to bump out with the rest of the song. Don't worry about that. You'll hear the complete song, other than a couple of voiceovers, here and there going over it in and out. That was Orianthe. She is a Greek? She's Greek, a Greek guitarist, and she freaking wails. So this was her version, her cover of Voodoo Child, which is originally by Jimi Hendrix, and we'll hear the rest of that, like I mentioned, going out of the segment, going out of the podcast. All right, so this is kind of a geeky podcast tonight. Well, it's always geeky. This is Geek Therapy Radio. This one is going to get not too heavy. I don't think it's any sort of concepts that are beyond the reach of even the average person. I'm going to try to explain it as best I can. But it's very fascinating, and I think it'll be fascinating to to many different walks of life, whether you're into computers or not, or kind of that technology or not. We all use computers. We all use USB sticks. I was going to say floppy disks and CDs, but no, we don't typically use very many floppy disks or CDs anymore. Not the average random person. I still have a bunch of floppy disks, but that's just because, well, I'm a little bit odd, and I have old computers that I still like to use. So on the big show this weekend, the Saturday night show that I had Colin Worth on from This Does Not Compute, the YouTube channel This Does Not Compute, we touched on the subject for a while, actually for quite a while. I brought up this concept, and then we got into data encryption and quantum computing and such, but I touched on Microsoft's Project Silica, because frankly, it's really neat. So let's just dive in. Project Silica is attempting to extend archival storage reliability from decades to centuries. That is, they're trying to take stored data in a format that can be read and won't deteriorate over the next decade, several decades to even centuries. They're picturing up to 10,000 years that they'll be able to store data with Project Silica. It aims to replace tape and optical disks as far as optical cold storage is concerned. And cold storage is basically storage that it's not on a spinning hard drive. Once you burn something to a CD or a DVD or a Blu-ray, for instance, you take it out of the drive and you can store it when it's not being read by anything mechanical. It's not spinning. There's nothing active going on with the disk itself. Same thing with tape. And yes, we still use magnetic tape, even in 2019, to store massive amounts of data, archive massive amounts of data in a relatively small format. So you think that the days of the cassette tape are over? Well, yes, maybe in the audio application, but as far as data storage, magnetic tape is still very much a viable format. But it's a cold storage format, meaning that you record your gigs and terabytes of data to a single cartridge of tape, and then you put it in a shelf somewhere. It is not doing anything mechanical anymore. It's just sitting there, versus more mechanical storage, like storing things on hard drives. That's not meant to be for archival purposes. Storing something on a hard drive is not meant to last for decades, or let alone centuries. It is still kind of a mechanism that's being used in a server, and it's active. And yes, I guess for the random consumer, I can store things on a hard drive. A lot of us do it all the time, but occasionally, as formats change, we take that hard drive and we'll bounce all the data to the new storage format. So whatever, that's a good example. Solid state, even though I've heard solid state is not the greatest way to archive things because of breakdowns in the topology and makeup of solid state cells, but that's not the point. The point is we went from optical hard disks to solid state storage. So you take all your data that was stored on an old optical hard disk, and then you move it all over to a solid state drive, and then you'll move it from a solid state drive to whatever the next piece of technology coming down the pipe is. So Project Silica is something that's aimed to be much more durable form of cold storage. So Microsoft, this is a partnership between Microsoft and Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers is very, very interested in archival cold storage. So what is Project Silica? Oh, quick note, by the way. Why would Warner Brothers be so interested in archival cold storage? Warner Brothers is a huge movie studio, a huge production facility, and they have lots and lots and lots of terabytes of data and footage that they would want to archive for later use, or whatever the purpose is in the future. But you want to hold on to these old movies, these movies that are currently being shot, in 8K, 12K, whatever's coming down the pipe in the future. That's a lot of data that you're going to want to store basically forever. So that's why Warner Brothers, being a movie production studio, consumes and produces many thousands of terabytes worth of data every year, and they want a storage solution that can basically keep up with that and archive what they're creating, at least the end result of what they're creating. Anyways, what is Project Silica made out of, and what tech is involved? It's simple and It's complicated to discuss, but the concept is kind of simple. But let's get into it. Here's how it's done. Voxels, and I'll go over all these terms in a minute. Voxels are etched into high purity glass using femtosecond lasers. Each voxel contains traditional bit information, that is ones and zeros, in one of two properties: retardance and angle, or angle. Retardance and or angle. Voxels can then be read with microscopic imaging using polarized light to detect the difference between retardance and angles, or in other words, zeros and ones. So a 2 millimeter thick piece of glass can contain around 100 layers of voxels. The microscopic imaging device can adjust focus between these layers to read those voxels, to read the retardance or angles, or the zeros and ones. So here's an extremely crude way to think about this. Think about black and white grains of sand suspended throughout a glass cube at different depths. So basically a snow globe where the snow inside is frozen. Those little bits and pieces of stuff suspended there. There's a white piece of sand, in this case a 0 bit, close to the top, while a black piece of sand, or a 1 bit, is a few millimeters below. So you have all these different ones and zeros at different depths and areas of this cube of glass. And again, that was an extremely crude way of thinking about it, but it will help to kind of visualize what's going on here. So a voxel represents a value on a regular grid in 3-dimensional space. So picture little cheese cubes. It's all in stacks. In 3-dimensional space, you have row of 8, another sideways row of 8, and then it's 8 cubes deep also. That's basically what voxels are. A voxel represents a value on a regular grid in 3-dimensional space. So in Project Silica's case, a 0 or a 1. A 0 or a 1 is etched onto the glass as retardance or angle. The femtosecond laser etches the retardance or angle in pulses of light lasting at most 1 femtosecond. And 1 femtosecond is 10 to the negative 15 seconds. 10 to the negative 15th of a second. That is an inconceivable short laser burst that etches these voxels consisting of retardance and angle into the glass. Remember, retardance and angle, that's the 0 and the 1, or vice versa. And voxels is just that bit. A voxel is whether or not it's got retardance or angle, and those voxels can be arranged on a regular grid in 3D space. Hence the grains of sand suspended in glass demonstration I gave earlier. I hope that's kind of making sense to you. Basically, it's a piece of glass that if you're looking at it, it has all sorts of reflections and refractions, and depending on the angle that the glass is etched, that's a 0 or a 1, and they use polarized light to read that angle of the glass to detect whether it's a 0 or a 1. So the technology is, the concept of it, even as good as I try to explain it, the concept of it is really rather quite simple. With a regular CDR, it's basically dark spots and light spots. Dark spot is a 0, light spot is a 1, or vice versa. But that's on a 2D little plane. That's on a sheet of aluminum, basically. With silica, you have these etchings all through the glass that are like the dark spots and the white spots of the CD. It's just in multiple layers. So you can store all that amount of information on the same surface area that a CD has, but you can actually go to different depths of the glass, of the layers, to store all the more information. In its essence, as a means of storage, it's not revolutionary. It's not a revolutionary concept. It's a revolutionary application and storage medium. Okay, so Microsoft has demonstrated this technology on a piece of glass measuring a perfectly square 7.5 centimeters by 7.5 centimeters and the aforementioned 2 millimeters thick. The data stored on the silica is on the square piece of silica is the 1978 movie Superman that took up 75.6 gigabytes. So how many gigs is a normal DVD? I think we got it up to 9.4 for a double layered DVD. So this piece of square glass that is a little bit smaller than a DVD holds, what's 75 divided by 9? Many, many times more information for the same surface area. And that is just a prototype. This is, of course, expected to go much, much higher in data capacity. And again, this is just a 2 millimeter thick piece of glass. Now imagine it 3 inches thick. What's 2 millimeters times 3 inches? That's all that more data that can be stored in basically this cube. But here's the thing. Here's the thing right now, and here's the thing kind of going into the future. It's slow. The read and write times for this are slow. It took nearly a full week to write about 76 gigabytes of data in the form of the Superman movie. And Microsoft estimates even today it would take 3 days to then read the data. So that's a write time of 76 gigabytes per week and a read speed of 76 gigabytes per 3 days. We are used to read and write speeds. I know the solid state drive on my laptop will read and write at 2.5 gigabytes per second. It would do 75 gigabytes. It would read transfer 76 gigabytes of data in a matter of seconds. With Project Silica currently, it takes a week to write it and then 3 days to read it. That is extremely slow. So needless to say, this is still in its infancy. This is still just demonstrating the technology. However, that being said, Microsoft naturally expects huge decreases in those read and write times. So no, it's not going to take a full week to write 75 gigs of data, and it's not going to take 3 days to read 75 gigs of data. It will get much, much faster than that. However, Microsoft doesn't expect the technology to ever reach real-time usability. In other words, you won't be able to watch movies directly off the disc. So with a DVD, you pop it in the DVD player and it's just reading the movie straight off the disc in real time, and the motion is playing back nice and smooth. Nothing's being missed. With Project Silica, even Microsoft imagines that it will never get to that point where you can just pop in a cube of Project Silica and just watch all your movies off of it. But that isn't the point. This is for extremely long-term archival purposes, meaning, let's use an example, for instance, for Warner Brothers. Let's say Warner Brothers puts, 100 terabytes of backup footage onto a cube of silica, Project Silica, onto a glass cube. And then some executive says, I need you to pull the B-roll from this movie that we shot in 2019, scene this, act 20, scene 32, camera B, 3 minutes and 50 seconds into the clip. I don't know what it's going to be, but you won't be able to pull that instantaneously. You have to go get the cube that is contained on, set it in its little reading device or whatever, and you'll have to wait. I don't expect it's going to take days to read and write, but it might take a few hours. Okay, you want this specific piece of data? You're going to put it in there and wait. Okay, it'll be ready in a few hours. I'll have it for you in a few hours. But again, remember, this is the type of storage solution that's supposed to last for 10,000 years. And if you want to store something for 10,000 years and you might not need it for another 1,000 years, then getting it off the storage medium quickly isn't the point. The point is durability. Now, that brings up the next point, the next kind of caveat or thing to consider here is it's glass. Yes, they have made glass quite strong, Gorilla Glass. For instance, all of our phone screens use a very tough form of glass called Gorilla Glass, made by that company. What company makes Gorilla Glass? I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a very durable glass, yes. However, it's not going to stand up to a hammer or a jackhammer. In that regard, as far as shock impact is concerned, glass is not super duper resilient. So let's say you're a company and you've stored some very valuable data, archived it on this Microsoft Silica, and the bad guy gets it, and they read the data off of it over the course of hours or days or however how long it takes. Or they just want to do damage and destroy all your backed up data. They just basically have to go into the warehouse with a bunch of hammers and just start smashing all these glass cubes. I would imagine that me thinking of this theoretical scenario, hypothetical scenario, is really facetious, and I do hope that comes through the microphone, because by the time that companies are storing so much data in these glass cubes, basically, that you'd hope by that time the glass would be virtually indestructible, or as close to indestructible as possible, or at least much stronger than any glass that we have around today in 2019. That said, usually the stronger you make the glass, the tighter the lattice work of atoms within the glass. The reason why phone screens are so smooth is because the glass is so strong. There's not a lot of gaps, basically, in between the atoms in the structure of the glass. In one way, that's one thing I don't like about modern smartphones, is that they slip without a case or a cover on it. They slip through your hands, so it's like you're covered in grease, but they're not really covered in grease. It's just that the glass is so smooth that your fingers just slide and glide all over it. So, while Sony Project Silica gets better and better, you would think that the glass would naturally get better and better. And as the glass gets better and better, stronger and stronger, that means you could hold more of those voxels within the glass. Remember, the voxels contain the retardance or angle, the 0 or the 1s, in that three-dimensional space. So if you make stronger glass, you have tighter atoms, you have tighter voxels, and that's more data density. I would imagine that going forward, that would be hand in hand. The durability and the data capacity would go up at the same rate, assuming that lasers can both make retardance and angle that small, make voxels that small, and then have a reading device able to read voxels that small. What's the narrowest? We're getting into some theoretical physics now. Not even theoretical, maybe it exists. I don't know off the top of my head what the most narrow wavelength of usable light is that won't kill anything that comes in contact with it. So, gamma rays, to a lesser extent, X-rays, depending on the dosage. If we're dependent on visible light, are we dependent on visible light? That's one thing that it doesn't go into. I haven't read. Is this visible light we're dealing with? Or is it... The one reason they call it Blu-ray is because Blu-ray has a very much narrower wavelength than red lasers. Usually CDs, as we know it, audio CDs are read by red lasers, RED, red lasers that have a wider wavelength than Blu-rays, which actually use a bluish purple laser that has a much narrower wavelength. That means you can fit much smaller light spots and dark spots on the surface of the Blu-ray disc, so you can pack all that extra data in there. So I wonder, it doesn't say what type of laser technology they're using. It doesn't say whether it's visible spectrum or not. Interesting. I guess that's subject to change anyways. As much subject to change as optical storage was. We went from CDs using red lasers all the way down to Blu-rays using purplish blue lasers. So I would imagine it's the same sort of thing for Project Silica. Anyways, I just thought that was really cool. I hope I did a decent enough job, even if it takes a few listens to pick up what I was laying down. I think it's one of those things that sounds really complicated because of all the terms: voxels, retardance, angles, femtosecond lasers. But when you really break it down simply, it's a pretty easy concept. to grasp. It'll just dawn. You'll be driving to work tomorrow. Oh yeah, I get what he's saying. Or you'll read it for yourself. Google it. Microsoft Project Silica. I just thought it was fascinating, and it was worth more discussion than I could get into over the weekend with Colin. So anyways, I'm going to play the rest of the song now as the bump out music for this podcast. One more time. I keep forgetting your name. This is Orianthi, Orianthi, her cover of Voodoo Child. Voodoo Child is one of my favorite songs of the entire world. And you know what? Be good to each other, my geeks, especially yourselves, including yourselves. Know that you are loved, that you are worthy of love. Altogether, embrace your inner geek, and let's just rock out to some Voodoo Child. I'll see you tomorrow.
Geek Therapy Radio, Saturday night at 10 on KPRC 950. Or listen anytime on our iHeartRadio app.